Good morning, everyone. Today, we will be looking into evolution of management thought. So, in principles of management, evolution of management thought is a very important concept. So, evolution of management thought can be classified under three heads, namely early classical approaches, neoclassical approaches, and the modern approaches. In the early classical approaches, which is the stage one of the evolution of management thought, three contributions have been made. One by Max Weber, bureaucracy is given by Max Weber, scientific management by F.W. Taylor, and administrative management by Henry Fayol. So, we will be looking into the early classical approaches in today's session. In the stage two, the contributions have been made by Elton Mayo, which is the human relations approach, and behavioral approach by Abraham Maslow. That is the neoclassical approaches. And in modern approaches, there are three modern theory. There are three approaches, namely the quantitative approach, systems approach, and the contingency approach. Today, in today's session, we will be looking at the early classical approaches, that is the contributions made by thinkers under the early classical approaches. The first theory that we will be looking into is Max Weber's bureaucracy. So, bureaucracy has been given by Max Weber, a German sociologist, and he is the first person to contribute to the evolution of management thought. And he emphasized on a bureaucratic structure, that is a hierarchical structure with which should have a clear rule, regulation, and the lines of authority to govern an organization. That is, bureaucracy is a highly structured, formalized, and an impersonal organization where it is a system where there is belief in the concept of a hierarchical structure with clear rules, regulations, and lines of authority which govern it. That is, the levels of management will have to be clear, where the top level management with jobs like the CEO, CFO, COO, and vice president, and all that. Then the middle management, which is interpreted as the regional managers, plant managers, and the branch managers. Then finally the supervisory management, where we can say that examples can be given like the team leaders, assistant managers, foreman, shift managers. All of them are part of the supervisory management. So a bureaucratic structure where the levels of management is clearly stated as the top management, middle management, and the supervisory management, which is propounded by the German sociologist Max Weber. The next contribution is made by Frederick Winslow Taylor, which is scientific management. Scientific management has been given to us by Frederick Winslow Taylor, who is the father of scientific management, whom we call the father of scientific management because he has given principles of scientific management. So, the principles of scientific management are separation of planning and execution based on specialization. So, according to F.W. Taylor, the planning and execution will have to be separated. That is, planning is a supervisor's job, and execution of that plan is the job of the worker within an organization. That is what is meant by separation of planning and execution. Then comes the functional foremanship. So, when we talk in terms of functional foremanship, it is a theory based on the specialization of a function. That is, the foreman is a person who oversees operations in a factory. So, the foreman must be 8 in number in an organization. 4 people should be into the planning activity, and 4 will have to execute that plan. That is what is meant by functional foremanship. So, there has to be multiple foremanship for different jobs in an organization. So, that is the second principle of scientific management. The third principle talks about job analysis. So, when we talk in terms of job analysis, he has given us 3 studies, namely the motion study, time study, and the fatigue study, that is minimum movement, that is the under motion study there has to be minimum movement, under time study there has to be less cost, and under fatigue study there has to be least uh, tiredness amongst the workers, so as to give them regular rest intervals. With the help of this motion study there has to be elimination of wasteful movement in performing the activities within the organization. Time study emphasized on the movement that takes minimum time in ensuring fair work, and fatigue study emphasizes on the employees to be given rest intervals so that they do not become tired both mentally as well as physically. So emphasizing on motion study, time study and fatigue study, he gave us the principle of job analysis. The third principle talks the fourth I'm sorry the fourth principle talks about improvement in work, that is standardized tools to be given to workers, that is the equipment and the tools given for production purposes will have to be standardized so as to uh, expect improvement in the productivity and improvement in the work environment within an organization. The next one was differential piece rate system. By saying that differential piece rate system, he emphasized on distinguishing between efficient and inefficient workers. Efficient workers should be given a different piece rate, that is the wage that he's being given should be different from the ones who are less efficient. The next principle is fitting the right person for the right job, that is through proper selection, training and placement the personnel within the organization should be fit in the right job. So that is what he meant by saying fitting the right man for the right job with the help of proper selection. And the last principle given by Frederick Winslow Taylor is mental revolution, that is creating a feeling that neither the employee nor the employer is exploiting each other. So there has to be a mental revolution in the minds of both the employer as well as the employee, so that none exploit each other for their benefits. The benefits will have to be mutual. That's what he meant by saying mental revolution in the minds of both the employer as well as the employee. So that is the contribution made by Frederick Winslow Taylor under the head of scientific management. Next, we move on to the third contribution made by Henry Fayol, who was a Frenchman. He gave us the administrative management or the management process. So, Henry Fayol is called as the father of modern management, or he is also called as the father of industrial management. Simply to say, we can also say that he is the father of management. He divided or he identified five managerial activities, namely planning, organizing, commanding, coordinating, and controlling. And he divided the industrial activities into six categories, namely the technical activities, where he emphasized on production and manufacturing, the commercial activities, which emphasizes on buying, selling, and exchange, the financial activities, where search for optimum capital is done, the security activities, which emphasizes on protection of property and persons, then the managerial activities, which we have already discussed under the heads of planning, organizing, commanding, coordinating, and controlling. Finally, the accounting activities, where stock taking, balance sheets, cost statistics, and all this is involved in the accounting activities. So these are certain contributions made by Henry Fayol. But the most important contribution made by Henry Fayol is the 14 principles of management, which hold good even in today's world. The 14 principles of management are division of work, authority and responsibility, discipline, unity of command, unity of direction, subordination of individual interest to general interest, remuneration to personnel, centralization, scalar chain, order, equity, stability of personnel, initiative, and esprit de corps. I repeat the 14 principles of management given by Henry Fayol. The first principle is division of work. The second principle is authority and responsibility. The third principle is discipline. The fourth principle is unity of command. The fifth principle is unity of direction. Sixth principle is subordination of individual interest to general interest. The seventh principle is remuneration to personnel. Eighth principle is centralization. Ninth principle, scalar chain. 10th principle, order. 11th principle, equity. 12th principle, stability of personnel. 13th principle is initiative. And the 14th principle is esprit de corps. Let us see the 14 principles one by one. The first principle is division of work. What is meant by division of work? The realization of the advantage of specialization. That is, the entire work within the organization will have to be broken down or divided into a number of segments. Each job to be carried out by persons specialized in it is what is meant by division of work. The next principle talks about authority and responsibility. So, when we talk in terms of authority and responsibility, the right to command and the power to make others obey the command is what is meant by authority, and responsibility means the accountability in performing the job. So, individual employees within the organization will have to be vested with both authority as well as responsibility. The third principle is discipline. So, discipline means obedience and respect shown by the subordinate to the superior. So, according to Fayol, discipline is what is the leader's activity. That is, the leader will have to ensure that there is discipline in an organization, and the cause for indiscipline is because of bad leadership. That is the idea of Henry Fayol. So he proposed three measures to ensure discipline in an organization. So the three measures to have good discipline are good supervision at all levels, clear and fair agreement with reference to disciplinary matters, and legal application of penalties. So, in case a person is not disciplined, it is because of bad leadership, and the measures that he suggested towards discipline are supervision at all point in time. Then there has to be clear cut rules and regulations in accordance to the organization in the disciplinary matters. Finally, levying of penalty in case the worker is not abiding by the superior and is not disciplined enough within an organization. So that is what is meant by discipline. The fourth principle is unity of command. That is, an employee must receive instructions only from one superior. That is, if there are multiple superiors for an individual employee, then his work will be not effective. So the command will have to flow only from one superior to the subordinate. If there are multiple superiors, then the subordinate will not be effective in executing his tasks within the organization. Then comes unity of direction. So the activities that is being given to the employees within the organization will have to flow in the same direction so as to achieve the organizational goals. So the direction of activities will have to be synchronized towards achievement of the organizational goal. So there has to be integration between the organization's goals and the goals given to individual workers within the organization. That is what is meant by unity of direction. Then comes subordination of individual interest to general interest. So when we talk in terms of subordination of individual interest to general interest, every individual employee in an organization will have his own aims and ambitions in life. So to fulfill his aim and ambition, he should not subordinate the interest of the organization to his or her interest. So, the development and progress of the organization should be put to priority than to the priority of the development and progress of an individual or worker or employee within the organization. That is what is meant by subordination of individual interest to general interest. When the organization grows, automatically the individual employee within the organization will also grow along the organization. So the individual will have to put his interest in subordination to the general interest of the organization. Then comes remuneration to personnel. Remuneration means payment of wage. That is, the wage system or the wage payment system should be fair and should satisfy both the employer as well as the employee within the organization. The eighth principle is centralization. When we talk in terms of centralization, it is concentration of power in one hands within the organization. Decentralization, on the other hand, is distribution of power within the organization is what is called as decentralization. So when we talk in terms of centralization, vesting of power in one hands is centralization, and distribution of power within the organization is called as decentralization. So there has to be a balance between both centralization and decentralization so that the authority can be dispersed in such a way that the smooth functioning of the organization is not disrupted. So there has to be a balance between centralization and decentralization in an organization. The next principle is scalar chain. So when we talk about scalar chain, the communication and the instruction should flow from the superior to the subordinate and the subordinate to the superior in a manner in which it does not bypass the actual hierarchy within the organization. So if in an organization, you can see this chart and understand as to what he meant by this gang plank. The usage of proper routes to communicating information within an organization is what is meant by gang plank. So gang plank here means if the employee A, that is the topmost authority in an organization, wants to receive an instruction from the bottommost employee in the organization, which in this chart we can say that it is N, it has to be routed through M, K, and J to A. So that is what is meant by scalar chain. So this route should not be bypassed at any point in time within an organization. That is what he emphasized by saying gang plank, which is the scalar chain principle under the 14 principles of management. The 10th principle is order. So when we talk in terms of order, he distinguished this order into two types, namely the material order and the social order. When we talk in terms of material order, there has to be a place for everything and everything must be put in its place. That is, there has to be place for material, and the materials, that is the resources within the organization, will have to have a place within the organization. That is what is meant by material order. The next type of order is the social order. So every individual employee within the organization should have a place for himself. That is the place for everyone and everyone in their place. That is proper selection of employees should be made, and favoritism must be avoided within an organization. That is what he emphasized by saying social order. So in order, he emphasized on two types of orders, namely the material order and the social order. The 11th principle is equity. So, when we talk in terms of equity, all employees in the organization should be treated equally with fairness, kindness, and justice. So, there has to be proper amount of application of equality based on loyalty and devotion. So, that is the principle of equity. The 12th principle is stability of personnel. When we talk in terms of stability of personnel, there has to be high employee turnover. That is, when we talk in terms of high employee turnover, how many number of people are leaving the job within an organization is what is associated with turnover of employees. So the people leaving the organization should be minimum. And in case there are a lot of people who leave the organization in a stipulated time frame, then he says, or Fayol emphasizes, that it is due to instability in the organization, or it is due to bad management practices within an organization. So there has to be stability of personnel within the organization. The 13th principle is initiative. What is meant by initiative? The subordinates within the organization must be encouraged to propose a plan and execute it. That is, if the employees or the workers in an organization have some plans or suggestions, it should be welcomed by the management of the organization, and there has to be scope for execution of that suggestion and plan which is brought forward by subordinates within the organization, which will in turn improve their loyalty and morale within the organization. So, that is what is meant by the principle of initiative. The last and the 14th principle under 14 principles of management is esprit de corps. Esprit de corps is a French term which means union is strength. Union here means unity. So, in other words, we can say that he emphasized on the principle of unity is strength, but it has to be quoted in terms of esprit de corps. That is, there has to be emphasis made on unity and harmony among employees for promoting teamwork, proper communication, and proper flow of information. So there has to be teamwork, emphasis made on teamwork for proper communication and proper building of team within the organization, which again will in turn improve the morale and motivation level among the employees of the organization. So these are the 14 principles of management. So in today's class, what we have wrapped up with is the evolution of management thought, under which we have seen the early classical approaches, which is the stage one of the evolution of management thought. What? Bureaucracy by Max Weber, Scientific Management by F.W. Taylor, and Administrative Management, or the 14 Principles of Management by Henry Fayol. With this, I wrap up today's session. Thank you.